All right, so thank you again for your attention this afternoon. And what we're going to talk about is schedules and the utilization of small business. If you've been with me in any of my other sessions over the past 2 days, I've literally talked about schedules overarching for about the first 20 minutes, give or take. All right, and so I think that I probably said mostly the same things in all 3 sessions, but I probably added or took away accordingly as it went. I apologize to those of you that have heard this, and this is going to be the 4th time. But we'd like to set a parameter of what we're talking about in regards to the schedules and how they work. And we're also videotaping these sessions because we have videos online right now that have about somewhere around 4 years of age on them, so we're trying to update. All right, so this course is endorsed by the Federal Acquisition Institute. It's endorsed by the Defense Acquisition University. There is an online version of it for government people to take through the DAU. It's good for 1 CLP today. It's good for 2 CLPs online because there is a little more information. So really what we're going to do is just talk about an overview of the schedules program. We're going to talk about social economics in government just from an overarching perspective. And then we're also going to talk about some aspects of GSA schedules and using schedules and receiving social economic credit at your agency towards your agency's goal in regards to awarding to small businesses. I will share with you right up front that this concept of set-asides in the schedules program is relatively new to government. Now, relatively new to us could be 3 to 5 years old or even older, and we still talk about it like it happened last month. But because of the Jobs Act of 2010, Section 1331 allowed for the set-asides at the order level in GSA contracting. All right, prior to that, you could not do set-asides. Now, if you've heard me already this week, you know that 80% of our vendors on schedule are small business. So the odds of getting a small business for an award are very good from the get-go. And the truth of the matter is that there was not a concern for the volume of work the small business did versus subs that they had. There's not a concern about the non-manufacturing rules in regards to whether they are a reseller on schedule of someone else's manufactured product. And the truth is, if this is a non-set-aside procurement, that rule is still pretty much the same. But the whole game changes if you make it a set-aside, because non-manufacturing rule comes into play, the aspect of subcontractors and the prime doing the predominance of the work comes into play. And so that's the major takeaway from this presentation, and you'll see that when we get to those slides as we go forth. So when we talk about schedules, you know that it is an IDIQ type contract that GSA puts in place. GSA is a federal agency, came into existence in 1949, and the concept was back then what it is really today, that one agency will do contracting principles and for commonly used items across government so that each individual agency doesn't have to repeat itself for those requirements, if you will. And so for commercial products, commercial services, commercial solutions, and we talked about solutions predominantly yesterday in a course that I gave on contractor team arrangements, where you have the capability of getting a vendor off of Schedule A and one off of B and one off of C, because what you have is a situation that is commercial by nature, but you just can't get everything that you need from one schedule. The whole project can't be completed by a single schedule. And so you actually can segregate the work in a way that members or contractors or vendors from various schedules could work together and do their portion. That's a whole nother topic in and of itself, but you have a way in government agencies have a way for commercial requirements that need a variation of work to be done to use schedules, even if it requires multiple schedules to come into the picture. And so we call them the GSA schedules, the multiple award schedules. I use the acronym MAS as in MAS, multiple award schedules. I use the word just schedules more frequently than not, and I'll always, in typing that, I'll say with a capital S because I look at it as a program. The FAR refers to the program as the Federal Supply Schedules in many places. And so, but there is only one program. This program is administered by GSA. We're not in it alone. There are 39 open and continuous solicitations, and we'll talk about those in a moment, but that means there's 39 schedules. And under each schedule are various special item numbers. And we speak about those SINs, as the acronym indicates, as that breaks down the nuance. The schedule is an overarching description of what is covered, and then we break down nuance in regards to specialty aspects within the SIN structure. And so VA is a part of this with us. Of the 39, GSA owns, manages, administers, awards 30 of those schedules. The other 9 are owned, managed, and awarded and administered by the VA. But all of the VA schedules happen to be medical by nature. Medical supplies, medical services, medical equipment. There's even a schedule out there for prescription drugs. All right, and so there's a tremendous amount of hospital structure within the government, and so they utilize those on a regular basis. And so, but they are within our element of the program. And so there are standing solicitations in FedBizOps. If you are a vendor here who has a schedule, you responded to a solicitation in FedBizOps that GSA has standing, all right? And so our solicitations are open all the time. They are refreshed on a regular basis, and so that they're always current, and so vendors can come into the program at any time. That's not to confuse government users that you have to use FedBizOps for your requirements that you want to buy through the Schedules program. You do not, at the user level, put your announcements in FedBizOps. It's not an option. You just don't do it. It's, we don't use FedBizOps on the government perspective. But I want you to think about it like this. The schedule is a contract. It is an IDIQ, an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity type contract. There is no money on it when it is awarded by GSA. And so we award that contract at the contract level. And so federal agencies are using it at the order level. So the announcement has already been in FedBizOps. And I say to you that you don't put your announcement in FedBizOps as a user because there is an exception in FAR Part 5 that deals with solicitations that says that you don't solicit a contract action that is against a contract that has already been solicited. All right, and so the solicitation occurred at the contract level, so at the user level, you do not. But you can get your notice out there as a government agency by utilizing your agency portal. You can utilize an email campaign, or you can use the GSA eBuy electronic RFQ tool, which is of a great advantage to you if you do. All right, and so GSA at the contract level awards these vehicles using FAR Part 12 procedures. 12 is the part of FAR that deals with commercial large dollar contracts, as 13 deals with simplified acquisition, 14 deals with sealed bidding, and 15 deals with negotiated procurements. And so as stated, it is in a multiple award IDIQ, and agencies will award open market IDIQs, usually with an initial year and 4 option years. Our schedules are awarded a little differently. They have a 5-year initial period with 4 5-year options, meaning that there could be this 20-year relationship between the vendors that we're speaking about, the commercial entities that we're speaking about, and GSA. To say that there would be an award that would go from day 1 to the final day in year 20 is without any actions placed against it in regards to modifications or updates or whatever is kind of silly to think about. Because in reality, there's always going to be the necessity for vendors to add product or take away product or to adjust pricing based on economics or something of that nature. And we're going to have to exercise those 3 5-year options with those vendors as well. But there could be contract actions between GSA and the vendors during that 5-year period. Now, the VA is a little different. They have an initial 5-year period and 1 5-year option. When we award at the contract level, we award fixed price EPA. In the world of government, you know that there is some variation in contract types that are all expressed in FAR Part 16. And so there are cost type contracting, which you don't find in GSA schedules, and there's fixed price contracting, and so forth. The most favored contract types in the world of government, from our perspective, being the government perspective, is the firm fixed price or fixed price with economic price adjustment. So the more favored contract types in government is what is awarded to the vendors who are in the program. All right, and so fair and reasonable pricing has been determined at the contract level. Now let me say this, If you work for DOD, you are aware that DOD a couple of years ago issued a class deviation saying that for any awards against the schedule program by a DOD activity, that you had to validate that the price was fair and reasonable at your command, for you at DOD. And you use FAR 15 pricing analysis for your validation, if you will. All right, and so that really does send a message in regards to DOD and their perception of GSA pricing. But I will share with you that we are more conscious of our pricing now, today than we've ever been. And that all of our vendors that are awarded based on any condition that could happen at the order level. And so let me say it this way, there are a lot of what ifs that are in that pricing from the contractors at the award level. But when you customize your requirement that marries to the particular schedule that's at hand, your customization is going to give that contractor the capability of reducing their price. And the quote that you'll get at the order level is going to be a quote that clearly is in a competitive realm with other vendors that are on schedule. And so they've got to cover their bases when they are set at the contract level based upon what all ifs could occur. And so, but when you start issuing that RFQ, you're looking physically for the best price possible, and they understand that. Schedule vendors can always come down. They can never go above what their schedule price is. And in more times than not, they are going to come down to be in a competitive range, all right? And so, and I use that term loosely because you know that we don't speak competitive range in the world of schedules. We use the term down select. But just to think about them being in a range of competition with the other vendors that are on the schedule is what I'm speaking to. And so we in government are required by the rules of 8.4 to seek a discount if it's above simplified acquisition threshold of 150,000. And we're encouraged to ask for one if it's below. No vendor is required to give one, but they understand to be competitive, they've got to look at their pricing structure. So when we speak about performance, that's at your level. As a user, it's at your level. So your requirement needs to marry to our schedule overarching description, and then you will pick the sins under that schedule that is most likely to be the arena where you'll find vendors that can meet your need. All right, the major parts of FAR that are in play right now is 8.4 because that's where the rules are for how to use schedules. We also talk about FAR Part 12 because GSA at the contract level physically awards using 12 methodologies. 6.102 Delta 3 is the part of FAR that, 6 being the part of FAR that deals with competition. This particular site says that schedules is a competitive processes. So any concerns with schedules being compliant with the Competition and Contracting Act should not be a worry. When we talk about other parts of FAR, we talk about 13 and 14 as being major parts that we understand. 13 is simplified acquisition, 14 is sealed bidding, 15 is negotiated procurements. They really have nothing to do with GSA awards. Now, I will say this, that under 13 it says except MAS BPAs. You can have, as a federal agency, an open market BPA where you have a repetitive need, and you can set up like a charge account with the vendors out there in the open market for them to provide product, you know, on a regular basis based upon a call, and then they would invoice you monthly and so forth. The BPA structure that's outlined in FAR Part 13 limits BPAs in the open market from exceeding the simplified acquisition threshold over the course of the term of the BPA, which would be an initial year most likely. And so $150,000 would be the extent. If you use the BPA structure that's in 13 and do a schedules BPA, then what you're doing is really having only scheduled vendors in that BPA pool, or a single schedule vendor under a single award BPA. But there's no limitation on the dollars. All right, and so you could have, and we have, federal agencies that have multiple award BPAs. I'm thinking of one in particular that has about 600 plus GSA vendors on it, and that in 2015, FY15 that is, there were physically upwards of $2 billion worth of task orders awarded against those 600 BPAs. In an additional side note, those 600 BPAs support over 800 subcontractors. All right, 14 sealed bidding, no application. 15 contracting by negotiations, no application. You know, the deal is that's not totally true, because 15 you award based on best value. In schedules, you award on base value. 14 you award based on low price, technically acceptable. Now, in the world of commercial application, it is more likely that the low price, technically acceptable is going to be the methodology of award. But you can, in schedule buying at the order level, use other factors than price for your award evaluation. You can use non-price factors, in other words. And so it's, that aspect of best value is critical. Small business programs, that's what we're going to talk about today, using the schedule program for set-asides. And so you would automatically think that 19 is absolutely applicable to the schedules program, but the truth is no. In fact, if you want to do a set-aside in the schedules program and you're looking in 19 for the processes, it says go to 8.405, because the process of set-aside under 19 is based upon an open market buy. The process for set-asides in the schedules program is found in the rules of 8.4, specifically 8.405, all right? Now, there are some aspects of 19 that would be applicable to your 8.405 GSA schedule small business set-aside. That being the concept of bundling, where you could take some small requirements and bundle them together for a larger one. I would also share with you that the definitions of the socioeconomic categories that are in 19 are applicable at the schedule level. I would also say that the size standards that is established in FAR Part 19 versus small versus other than small is going to be applicable at the schedule level, but not the processes. Also, FAR Part 36 deals with construction and architectural and engineering contracting, and that's not applicable to schedules for this one purpose or one reason. There is no schedule for construction services, RA and E services, when it comes to the schedules program. But there is some capability as an ancillary service to another requirement that you might have to get some construction work done on your schedule buy. An example I've been given the past couple of days is where FEMA recently bought in the last couple of years some major generators. I'm talking about generators to light a building, to light the center that we're in, and so forth. And so they're set on, they're huge, they're very heavy, they're delivered on tractor trailers, they're set on a foundation using a crane. All right, and so that foundation can't be the grass next door to your building. It's going to need to be a poured foundation. Some of the specs I've read have the footer being as much as 36 inches deep. All right, and so that's construction work. All right, and so, but it's ancillary to the main purpose of the requirement. The purpose of the requirement is to buy the generators, which are major expense. And so you can have some ancillary construction available, and some of our schedules give ancillary service of that nature, for example, Schedule 56. Parts of FAR that are always applicable in almost all government requirements that are going to be purchased are here. FAR Parts 7 and 10 are critical: acquisition planning, market research. No matter what the government is going to buy, we're going to do market research. One aspect of schedules is that we have some e-tools: GSA Advantage, GSA E-Buy, GSA E-Library. Those tools can be used for market research, and you can document your contract file if you're a government contracting shop based upon that information. I read a case not so very long ago that came out that had to do with a protest for an agency who used GSAE tools for their market research, and then they ended up buying what they were going to buy in the open market. It wasn't that it wasn't available through schedules, because it was, and they could validate their government independent estimate based upon their research that they used, but they just chose to go the open market route. And so there was a protest against that. And so, but when it came to GAO, they said that it didn't matter. Market research is market research if it can be validated. And so the source of that market research wasn't the question at all. But 17.5 deals with interagency acquisitions. We're talking about another agency using another agency's vehicle. All right, so you want to use the GSA schedule. All right, so you're using GSA's vehicle, contract vehicle. Physically speaking, you can do that. 17.5 has two aspects to know. It says that if your requirement's above $500,000, you need to document your file to that aspect, that your market research and acquisition plan has shown that schedules is the viable way to make this procurement. All right, there is another aspect for DOD, that if you are above that threshold and you're going to make this buy, that you need to know that the GSA senior procurement executive has documented that all the schedules are compliant to all FAR requirements for this FY. And so on October 1st every year, our senior procurement executives post that letter on the DPAP website. There is one there for FY16 right now. All right, so protests, yes, unfortunately there can be protests against the schedule buy. But statistics show that the volume of protests against schedules versus the number of schedule buys that are out there is low compared to FAR 15 and the protests that are there. I think I've quoted this week saying that the most common protest against the schedule buy is a misuse on the user side of methodologies, mixing methodologies, for a mixing of 15 processes with an 8.4 processes. That's why I'm such a stickler when it comes to terminology, and terminology putting you into a particular arena of procurement, if you will. 37.6 deals with performance-based acquisitions, and we at GSA support OFPP in the process that performance-based statements of work are preferred over any other type. And so with performance-based, what's going on is that, physically speaking, the government is telling what we want the end result to be. And so the contractors give us a performance look from their perspective, if you will. And so if this was an RFP under FAR 15, we would say that this was a technical proposal. But proposal is associated with a 15 buy. So since we're in an 8.4 arena, we'll say that what the contractor is going to give us is a technical approach. Really not much difference there other than the terminology, but it's the contractor's perspective on how they can meet that end result. And then the government will evaluate, make the decision for award, and then we let the contractors perform. We may monitor, we may not during that performance. 39, or Part 39 of the FAR, deals with information technology, and I would share with you that we have lots of IT available through schedules. Schedule 70 has over 5,000 vendors on it. There's also GWACs available through the GSA program. Only 3 agencies in government have GWACs. The Army has the CHESS program called CHESS. NASA has one called SEWP, S-E-W-P, and then NIH has one as well, in addition to GSA. You can get delegated authority to use the GSA program. We have a course online at the DAU portal where you can, as a contracting professional in government, take that delegation of authority to use our GSA schedules, GWACs, if you will, our GSA GWACs. All right, so comparing an 8.4 versus 15, 15 requires processes. One part of that processes is formal SSEB, Source Selection Evaluation Board, and so it would have a source selection authority, it would have legal on that board, it would possibly have, obviously going to have contracting, it would have technical, it may even have financial. And so in the world of 15, that's a processes, and it takes time and involves people and resources. In GSA, we don't use that process no matter what your dollar threshold is for your buy. All right, so if you're buying from the schedules, you don't use that formal SSEB procedure. I would say to you that you could if you wanted to. I just don't know why you would want to tell you the truth. All right, you're going to issue a solicitation under 15 rules for a minimum of 30 days. That's not a 15 perspective. That's because of competition. That's because of the Competition and Contracting Act and a requirement that your solicitation be public for a minimum of 30 days. You would have to take exception to CEQA. And the exception through CEQA is one of the seven exceptions in FAR Part 6. And so of those 7 exceptions, 5 of them require a J&A or a JOFOC, a justification or an approval if you're within DOD. Same document is called by the civilian agencies the JOFOC, which is a justification for other than full and open competition. Same document. All right, but in the world of schedules, at the order level, that concept of CEQA was met at the contract level. So your solicitations under schedules don't need to be 30 days unless you want them to be. The most common time for schedules posting at GSA, on a GSA by an agency, is 10 to 15 days. Now, you can post a requirement on GSA e-buy, the electronic RFQ tool, for as short as 48 hours. All right, and then of course another bullet here says we don't do a synopsis in FedBizOps at the order level. So think about this. If you've got to post your requirement under a 15 in FedBizOps, boom, there's 2 weeks. If you've got to leave it up there for a minimum of 30 days, we're talking about a good 6 weeks, 45 days, give or take, that you're going to be in this contracting processes once you're ready to issue the solicitation, and before you can even look at the proposals that you're getting back in. But if you're doing this under schedules, you don't synopsize, you could post your requirement for 10 to 15 days, you would get your quotes in, and you physically could have made this award by the time you've got all of your proposals in and are ready to open them at the end of the 45-day period. All right, and so you're either in the program or not once you do that market research. So, you're not seeking competition out of the program if your decision is to be in. And there's things like discussions. In the world of FAR Part 15, we talk about discussions and we talk about clarifications, and we know the difference between the two. In the world of GSA, we don't use the term discussions as a matter of processes. We say that we have open communication with the vendors during the schedule solicitation period. We're able to answer questions and do clarifications with them during that processes. All right, but we also, in under 15, we think about debriefs being pre and post award based upon whether we have a competitive range determined. And in the world of schedules, we don't use any of those terms. They are 15 terms and actually connotate a processes for each. So let's just put it this way. If you have a FAR 15 solicitation, you issued the RFP to 10, 12, or 15 vendors, and you got 10, 12, or 15 proposals back, all right? And so you're going to have to evaluate them all. And then you're going to narrow down the field or create a competitive range because these 3, these 4, these 5 have the most reasonable expectation of winning the award. The others are sent a notice that they didn't make the competitive range. But under 15 rules, they could ask for a pre-award debrief, and you would be required to do the formal processes of the pre-award debrief with the vendor. All right, then once you have looked at those in your competitive range and come to an award, you make the award, and physically speaking, the ones that didn't get the award are now given a post-award notice that they did not win. Really, the notice comes out and says so-and-so did win, so you know you did not. And then you are given the opportunity to do a post-award debrief request. And so in schedules, for a vendor that failed to win the order, the task or delivery order, they have an opportunity to ask for what we call feedback. And that's where GSA, that's where the ordering activity contracting officer will have the opportunity to give feedback to the vendor as to where they were in the standings in regards to, we'll take your quote, Mr. or Ms. Vendor, we'll look at the evaluation factors and say why you failed to find yourself in an award arena. We're not going to compare your quote to the winners. We're not going to compare your quote to any of the other participants. It's the same processes that's done in this debrief that we just spoke about with under 15, but the difference is that it's less formal, very less formal. In fact, it can be done in a telephone call as opposed to having a formal meeting. And the competitive range that we talk about under FAR 15, we call that same processes down selecting. So I sent out an RFQ to 10, 12, or 15. I got my quotes back in. I looked at them all. I chose the ones that are have the most reasonable expectation of winning the award. Those were the ones I down selected to concentrate on for an award. So the processes are similar, but we refer to them by different names. And physically speaking, the processes are not as formal as they would be if you would under a FAR 15. So you're not going to do in and out of the program. You're either in the program or not, and then you're not going to synopsize. And one of the things about the synopsis that, if I didn't mention it already, is that there's only one opportunity ever that you would use FedBizOps in a GSA schedule, and that's if you're limiting sources and you want your schedule buy to be sole source. If you're going to be sole source, you're going to have to complete what's referred to as an LSJ, a limited source justification. It's not the JNA, it's not the JOFOC. It is a document that is unique to limiting sources under schedules. It's expressed in 8.406 of the FAR. That's where the LSJ information is. But if you're going to do sole source, you would be required after the buy, posting a notice in FedBiz Ops that you did make the buy sole source off a GSA schedule, and you need to do that within 14 days of the buy, and that you would have to leave that notice there for 30 days. So ordering procedures are pretty straightforward for supply items and fixed price services without a statement of work. This is at 8.405-1. Below micro, just place an order with a vendor that's on the schedules program after you do your market research. It says to distribute it, that meaning that you would not use that vendor over and over and over again for orders under $3,500, but kind of rotate that around with the vendors if that's the limitation on your orders. If you're above $3,500 but you're under $150,000, then you're going to survey 3 vendors or 3 contract orders in the schedule. Survey. It can be an email survey, telephone survey, whatever is most practical to you. Use the LSJ if it's applicable. You're going to make a determination of whether you're going to ask for a price reduction because you're not at the required stage to seek a price reduction, because that is at 150. So that's a decision that would be made at your agency level. All right, best value determination, then you just make the award. But if you're above 150, you develop an RFQ, your goal is to get 3 quotes. Now, if you use any method other than GSA e-buy for your distribution of your RFQ, you have to get 3 quotes. All right, but if you use GSA e-buy, that meets fair notice according to the FAR, meaning that even though you only chose 6, 8, or 10, or 12 vendors off of this particular schedule, and there happen to be over 300 vendors on this schedule, the rest of them could see it. They didn't get a notice from eBuy like the ones you selected, but the rest of them can see it if they search their eBuy account. And that's a very big if, because our statistics show that the average quotes received on an eBuy solicitation is 3.3. And so you're not going to be inundated with lots of quotes from vendors that you never even solicited, if you will. So limited source, if it's applicable, you seek a price reduction because you're above 150, and then of course you're not going to place these orders orally, and you're going to make them based on a best value determination. Now, a little difference here if this is 8.405-2. Dash 2 is services that require a statement of work. But if you're below micro, same rule applies. Just pick a vendor and award. If you're micro 2 simplified acquisition, you do create a statement of work with evaluation criteria. You issue the RFQ to a minimum of 3, hopefully more, with the goal to get 3 quotes. And then when we speak about the LFJ, if it's applicable, you distribute it amongst the vendors and best value. But the big difference comes in if you have a statement of work service, you're above $150,000 at the user level. Because you do develop a statement of work and with evaluation criteria, your goal is to get 3 quotes. That rule of e-buy and fair notice is still applicable in this arena. LSJ is okay. Seek a price reduction because you're above 150, best value determination. But look, overall price reasonableness determination considering the mix of labor and the level of effort. And so you have to do a little more stringent type of evaluation for the quotes that you get, because you're going to have various descriptions of labor. And so those descriptions of labor are going to be expressed by the contractors that are giving you a quote in the volume of level of effort, usually based upon some type of hourly, a number of hours to complete the task at hand. And so you want to make certain that your government independent estimate is marrying to what the contractors are saying or quoting. You want to look at the various contractors and make a determination that they are, that they are in sync with one another. All right, and so over 40 million supplies or services are there. We've already spoke about the 39 and the 9. We spoke about the fact there's over 17,000 contractors, 80% of small businesses, and this program really is $40+ billion annually right now, currently. It's been as high as $50 billion annually in past years. And so, but orders and BPAs can be set aside for small businesses. And so that's really the crux of what we want to talk about today is the small business set-aside portion. And it can be done for any of the services that we have. And so the services that are available are wide-ranging. I would share with you that physically speaking that this is not even the complete list because there are others that you might be able to find under GSA e-library. There's also supply elements that are here. These are categories of supplies, if you will. Excuse me. And so these also, to me, represent, if you will, acquisition centers where GSA contracting people are physically making these awards. All right, so small business set-asides. We are there. All right, and so we have always, and I say we, GSA, in the Schedules program, have been a supporter of small businesses. 80% of our vendors are small. In fact, prior to November the 2nd, 2011, you could not do small business set-asides. And so the ordering procedures that are still in 8.4 today do show how you can use small business size status or business size status as an evaluation factor to make an award. And you are encouraged in 8.4 to use that as an award to awards a small business if they are there. But I would say to you that the procedures of 19 is not applicable for the small business set-asides in the Schedules program. All right, and so when we think about those exceptions, we talk about size standards and bundling and the socioeconomic descriptions. But when we talk about socioeconomic preference non-set-aside, that's where an agency sees that there's lots of small businesses, but we're not certain where they buy their items that they're going to resell to the government because the non-manufacturing rule is critical. I mentioned that earlier. And also the aspect of subcontracting is critical if we make it a set-aside. And so when we think about that, in 8.405-5 that gives information in regards to considering a small business, dash 5D Delta says give preference to small business if you have at least 2 quotes. We also encourage that team arrangement with a number of small businesses working together. In the world of non-set-aside schedules by, there's no concern with the amount of subcontracting the awardee does. All right, and so if the awardee does a tremendous amount of subcontracting, that's not a concern in regards to you're getting the socioeconomic credit because you're still awarding to the small business that it has their own GSA schedule. All right, and so when we speak about that aspect, you could use socioeconomic status as a primary evaluation factor and so forth, and when you're moving forward. But when we speak about, and this is just an aspect of different categories of socioeconomic status, most all of them are available to you through the Schedules program. You can look through the GSAE tools and see the size status of every schedule holder under that particular schedule and SIN. When you're looking at the laundry list of vendors that are there, there's a column that has their size status listed, and so you will know what they are or how they were awarded. And so when we speak about this 19 not applying, I've emphasized that already. It takes you to 8.405-5 for how to do the set-aside. And so we say that contracting officers in the government sector, it's discretionary as to whether they use schedules as a set-aside program or not. All right, and so they make that decision at their level in that regard. And so set-aside orders can be placed against multiple awards contract of any small business concern that we have in our program. GSA literally has some schedules and some SINs that are already total set-asides, and so there's nothing but small businesses in there. And so if you're using the search engine GSA e-library, physically speaking, you can look at that and quickly just search for small business set-asides and find those schedules that have already been set aside at the schedule level for your use, all right? And so we can see that there's got to be clauses that are going to be in the contracts at the contract level. And so when we GSA literally we were notified that set-asides could occur in our program effective November the 2nd, 2011, we had to do a mass mod to all of our schedule holders at the contract level so that they would understand that there could be set-asides now. Because if you're doing an open market procurement under FAR Part 15, you're going to make it a set-aside. There's going to be appropriate clausing in your solicitation at the RFP level to indicate that this is a set-aside. And so none of our solicitations at the contract level had any of that because you couldn't do set-asides in schedules before 2011. All right, but now all of our schedules, all of our awardees have those clauses so that any type of set-aside that would be allowed under the 8.405 rules can be done. And what it's saying in here is that it can be done whether it's products and services without a statement of work or services with a statement of work, or even under scheduled BPAs that you might set up. All right, and so orders of place go to, the agency gets that socioeconomic goal. All right, but there's an aspect here of businesses being qualified as small, all right, from the time they get their GSA award. And so there was a case that goes back all the way to 2002 where a GAO made a ruling that said that a government agency could ask for a recertification of the GSA scheduled vendor if they so desired. And so here's how Tommy kind of sees a scenario that you're about to make you're going to issue a solicitation, you're wondering about some of the vendors and their status under GSA, and so it says that they're small, but you may have question about that. So you want to have, before you make an award to one of them as a small business, you want to validate their status. So you could ask for a recertification. That's what the GSA ruling is going to do. Well, the ruling may be applicable in the open market, but it may not be applicable to them under their current contract with GSA. And the way I'll express that is like this. We've already expressed that there's an initial award for a 5-year period, IDIQ for 5 years. Then there's 3 5-year options. I have seen where a vendor was awarded their initial 5-year period as a small business. And they were right, the example that's in my head right at the moment had that particular business being on the cusp of being large when they were awarded their 5-year period. So their first year as a GSA vendor was good. It was good. They marketed themselves well, they got a bit of business, and by the end of their second year, they had already crossed over that threshold, and now their business was in the open market categorized as large. And so now it's year 3, and you want to make an award to them under a GSA buy. And that GSA buy is going to be for an initial year and 4 option years of your requirement. And so you're looking at that and you're thinking, well, gosh, I know this company. We awarded to them last month on an open market FAR 15, and they are large. And so you say, but GSA says they're small. So you approach GSA, and GSA explains it to you like this. They were small when they were awarded 2 years ago, and they will stay small until they have to recert at their option time at the conclusion of this initial 5-year period. Now, they could be forced to recertify it earlier if there's a novation or a merger or an acquisition that affects their company. But other than that, I'm going to tell you, they're going to be small for the remainder of this 5-year period because that's how they're awarded. So take this to heart. The truth of the matter is, you could award to them now as a small business under schedule, and you awarded to them a couple of months ago on the open market. You could have 2 awards working with the same company where one of them would be them as a large business or a other than small, is how we say it in government. And then you could have one to them where they are actually a small business. Now, the question that came after that is that, well, I want this to be a 5-year effort. An initial year with 4 option. And what you're telling me, Tommy, is that my first 3 years with them, they're going to be small, but then they're going to have to recertify, and so now they're going to be other than small with GSA. Yes, I agree, but I've got 2 more years. And so what does that mean to me? That means that as long as you exercise that option based on the original award that you made to them, they're still going to be small for your remaining 2 years. So your entire 5-year level of effort with this business is going to be socioeconomic small business, whatever category you decided that you wanted it to be, and physically your agency would receive that credit towards your agency goals. But if this is going to be a recompete for you at the conclusion of 5 years, then that vendor, your incumbent, will most likely not be eligible because they will be now having recertified as a other than small business. Are you with me? All right, and so that's critical. That's really critical. And so you know all of the categories that are there. I would say to you that most agencies are meeting their social economic goals. One goal that is kind of tough for most agencies is that of hub zone. I don't know if any of you can relate to that or not. I see some nodding heads out here. So I'm thinking that you're just like us in that regard. All right, and so, but we also need to talk about, and there's the hub zones and small disadvantaged businesses. Let me quickly say something about 8A contracting. You understand what 8A contracting is. It's a program set up by the SBA. It gets its name because the vendors qualify through Section 8A of the Small Business Act, all right? And so who are the small businesses that are in the 8A program? They're small disadvantaged businesses. Years ago, GSA had an MOA with SBA. If I could get one more acronym in there, I would. All right, but the deal is that SBA allowed agencies who awarded to 8As under GSA schedules to use that 8A status as for any type of goal within their agency or anything of that nature as far as dollars are spent with 8A firms. But in reality, it wasn't a true 8A buy because an 8A buy is set up where SBA becomes the prime, and then the agency's using SBA who gives them privity to the 8A vendor, and so we've got this triangle type relationship going on here, and that's not how we do schedule buys. And what was happening back in those years, and we're talking double-digit years ago, 10, 12, 15 years ago, when this was in effect, physically speaking, the small disadvantaged businesses in the 8A program who were schedule holders were graduating out of the program early. SBA was not happy with that. Physically, the program is set up on a 9-year cycle. Some of you may be very well aware of that, and that they were graduating early, which wasn't really the intent of the program. So SBA, when the MOA expired, did not allow us to renew it. And so now, agencies that use the schedules can see that a vendor in the program may be an 8A vendor, but that vendor, if you will, is not going to have a true 8A buy to you, all right? And so when we speak about it, could I as an agency do an 8A set aside in schedules? Yes, you could do it. Am I going to get 8A credit for that? No, you're not. The only credit you're going to get is small disadvantaged business credit because the 8A program is for small disadvantaged businesses. So if that's the goal, then you might just be better off served to just make your small business set-aside SDB, in the regard of the set-aside capability. All right, and so when we talk about the non-manufacturing rule, what happens is that this rule is for product, obviously, it doesn't apply to services, but it's where there are resellers. There's lots of resellers under the GSA Schedules program who sell someone else's manufactured product. And so in the world of non-set-asides, there is not a concern for a small business selling an other than small product, all right, that was manufactured by an other than small manufacturer. Physically speaking, you would still get the socioeconomic credit. The same thing is true with subcontracting. And so if it is a non-set-aside and the small business you're awarding to uses other than small for a predominance of the work, then that's not a concern either. You still get the socioeconomic credit. But here is where I started this talk today, where the rubber meets the road. If you make it a small business set-aside, then the clause at the contract level says that subcontracting is limited to those to not the predominance of the work. So the awardee has to do that 50%, all right? And then the non-manufacturing rule comes into play at the order level as well. And so when we speak about this, if you're going to consider in your market research to do a small business set-aside in the schedules program, you need to extend your market research to those potential small businesses so that you can validate that they use other small businesses for their subs, or they don't, there are for a fact that they do a predominance of the work themselves. And that if they're a reseller selling something back to your company, or excuse me, something back to your agency, that physically the source of their supply is a small manufacturer, because that's going to be critical, because if it's not, then they're not going to qualify to win this award as a small business set-aside in the schedules program, okay? And so that is a strict adherence policy, and I would say that the competitors of these small businesses know the sources that each of their competitors actually use, so you could expect something. So the NMR does not apply to service contracts. NAICS codes and size standards flow down from the contract level to the order level. I was having a conversation earlier today about NAICS codes, and it reminded me of a call I got just last fall on a year-end buy. And I was answered the phone, and the lady said that she had been listening to some webinars, and she had looked me up through the GSA directory, and that she had a requirement that they were trying to award before year end so they didn't lose the money, but that the NAICS code that they had for their requirement was not the same that we had at the contract level. The description of the work and the contractors that were there were suitable for what they needed to accomplish. And she asked me the question, will you change your NAICS codes? And I said, ma'am, it's very unlikely that we will. And I said, it's even very unlikely that we could add yours to the mix at this late date at the year end. I said, I would advise you to go back through your legal and ask about changing your NAICS code to marry, if you say that the description of the schedule marries to your requirement, change to one of our NAICS codes for this requirement. She says, I'm not sure that our legal would do that. And then another voice came on the phone. A gentleman started talking and identified himself by name and position, being the legal officer for the command. And so my first reaction was, okay, the lawyer was on the phone the whole time and didn't let me know. But that's a whole nother story. But the final decision was that lawyer said, yes, I understand, because it's statutory that the NAICS at the contract level marries to the task or to the order at the task level. And so that concept is very well valid, okay? And so here are some of the clauses that are applicable, that are at the contract level, that you can rest assured that are going to be within that base contract for you to be able to do the small business set-asides. This diagram or flow chart is very difficult for you to see, obviously, from there. I can hardly see it from here. But it really is a diagram or a process flow to whether you make a decision, yes or no, as to whether you're going to utilize a small business set-aside in the schedules program. This will be in the slide deck that you can download later, if you will. You know, when you issue an RFQ at the task and delivery order level, physically speaking, you're going to identify that this is going to be a schedule buy with the schedule number and the SINs that are appropriate. If you're making it a small business set-aside, you have to have a statement that says this RFQ is for a small business. If you're using GSA buy and you click yes to small business set-aside, this statement here populates itself in your RFQ online. But if you're doing another method of solicitation, an email campaign or something of that nature, you need to include that. And so here's the aspect of doing the concept of using eLibrary and doing a set-aside and so forth, and you can just make the drop-downs. So market research is critical. You can do any kind of sort of market research, and you can see finding the vendor list. You can see there's a column that's going to give you the socioeconomic status of the vendors. In this eBuy element here, you can check yes to for set aside, and then do a drop down where it's going to allow you to choose whether it's going to be small, service disabled vet, woman owned, whatever the category that you so desire. All right. eBuy is going to take you the capability of seeing all of the vendors and their capability to choose which vendors go in your eBuy solicitation. Those vendors will receive an email telling them all about it, okay? And so just to quickly recap, only on the left side. Question, can we have small business set aside in the schedules program? Yes, you can today, since November the 2nd, 2011. All right, does 19 apply? No, it does not. 19 says go to 8.405 if you're going to do a schedule set aside for processes or procedures. All right, is there any limitation on subcontracting? You betcha. the awardee has to do a predominance of the work, so the 50% element plays. Does the non-manufacturing rule apply? Yes. If they are a reseller of someone else's manufactured good, that someone else has to be a small business as well. And so your agency would get the social economic credit. No rule of two, as we know in FAR 15, but there is a concept here of using small businesses as an evaluation factor, okay? And so, lesson summary, we did all those things, all right? And so just for purposes, we gave an overview of schedules and we defined social economics. We did look at the small business set-aside program in the schedules. We identified the nuance between receiving a social economic credit for a non-set-aside versus a set-aside, and talked about those competition requirements. Lots of web resources in this slide deck that you'll be able to see if you do decide to download it. There is this top one here, training guides. The MAS training on small business set-asides that's on the DAU portal has a student guide, and it's in a PDF, and you physically can download it right from that portal, if you will, all right? And then, so we do the webinars twice a month, and we're doing training videos. We're updating our videos while we're here at this conference. MAS desk references out there. You may have gotten one of these in one of the attending classes. We have a few more of them, I think, in the back of the room if you did not. This is version 6. It's a little tiny bit out of date, but I would share with you that it's being updated right now. Next 60 days, it'll be available publicly, and will be online. And that's going to bring us to a conclusion.